I am Sitting Bull, Tatanka Iotek. A name that means, buffalo who sits. I sat firm for my people. I stood tall for our way of life. I was born around 1831 on the wide, rolling plains of what is now South Dakota, that untouched land where the buffalo roamed free and the rivers ran clean. I am of the Hunkpapa Lakota Sioux, a people whose roots are deep in the soil of this land, whose spirit is carried by the wind and whose stories are carved into the hills and stars. From the time I could walk, I was taught that the land is sacred, that it is not owned, but lived with. That to protect our way of life was not just a duty, but an honor. As a boy, I listened to the elders speak around the fire. I watched the warriors ride with purpose. I learned not just to fight, but to understand what was worth fighting for. By the time I was a young man, I was already seen as a leader, not because I sought power, but because I carried the burden of responsibility with pride. I became a warrior of the Lakota, not for glory, but for survival. We were being pushed, always pushed, by an encroaching tide of soldiers, settlers, and treaties made to be broken. Every fence they built cut through our freedom. Every promise they made died with the wind. And so we resisted. Fiercely. I remember the Battle of the Little Bighorn. It was June 1876. The sun was high, and the smell of dust and smoke filled the air. My people had gathered in large numbers along the greasy grass, Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho alike. We stood together not as tribes, but as one nation. They say I had a vision before the battle, a vision of soldiers falling into our camp like grasshoppers from the sky. That vision came true. We fought to protect our families, our horses, our future. And that day, we prevailed. General Custer and his men fell beneath the thunder of our defense. But victory was not triumph, it was only a moment of breath before the storm returned. But I was more than just a warrior. I was a Wichasa-Wakhing, a holy man, a spiritual voice among my people. My visions guided not only our battles but our choices in the quieter moments. I prayed not only for strength in war but for peace after it. When the white man's pressure became overwhelming, I led my people north into Canada. For years, we lived in exile, beyond the grasp of the U.S. Army, under the protection of the Crown. But the cold was harsh, the buffalo scarce, and my people grew weary of hunger and exile. So in 1881, I made a painful choice. I returned to the United States. I surrendered, not out of defeat, but in hope of peace. Of survival. They sent me to live on the Standing Rock Reservation. There, I watched our freedom erode further, year by year. The government tried to silence me. They tried to separate me from my people, strip me of influence, reduce me to a name in a ledger. But I never stopped speaking. I never stopped standing. In 1885, they let me leave for a time, to join Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. I wore my regalia and sat atop my horse before cheering crowds, but it was not honor they gave me. It was spectacle. They saw a legend. I was still living the fight. And then came the ghost dance, the last desperate prayer of our people, a belief that the earth would shake and sweep the oppressors away, that the buffalo would return, and our ancestors would rise. The U.S. government feared it. Feared me. And so, on a cold morning in December of 1890, they came for me. There was confusion. Shouting. A gun was fired. I was shot and killed by Indian police, as were others, my own people, turned against me under orders. That was the end of my life. But not my story. My spirit still walks these plains. I am Sitting Bull, Tatanka Iotek. My story is one of resilience, courage, and unshakable faith in our land, our ancestors, and our future. They tried to erase us. But we are still here.